Welcome to the debate. Today, we are tearing into what is probably the holy grail of personal finance. We're talking about that purple book that, well, it launched a million real estate empires and probably annoyed just as many certified accountants. We are analyzing Robert Kiyosaki's Rich Dad, Poor Dad.
Yeah, this book has sold, over 30 million copies? It's a total cultural phenomenon. You can't avoid it. And its core message is basically that the old American dream, go to school, get a safe job, save your money, is actually a nightmare in disguise.
Exactly. But today, we're not just going to, nod along with the financial freedom chants. We need to look under the hood. We have to ask, is this book a legitimate masterclass in wealth generation, or is it a collection of, frankly, dangerous oversimplifications that insults the working class and encourages a kind of reckless gambling?
That's the perfect way to frame it. So I guess the central question today is, does Kiyosaki's philosophy of redefining assets and escaping this rat race provide a necessary liberation for the modern earner? Or does it fundamentally undervalue labor, stability, and just the practical realities of the average person?
I love that. I'm the advocate, and I'm arguing that the rich dad philosophy is really the only way to break that psychological reliance on a paycheck that keeps people trapped.
And I am the dissenter. I'll be arguing that while the book has, yes, some motivational value, it relies on redefining standard accounting terms to suit a narrative. It dismisses professional expertise, and it promotes a high-risk lifestyle that is just not feasible for most people.
Okay, let's get right into it then. The reason this book strikes such a massive nerve, why it's still on bestseller lists decades later, it isn't really about the real estate advice. It's the mindset shift. It exposes a huge gap in our education. We are trained from kindergarten all the way to grad school to be employees, not employers. And the core of my argument starts with the book's origin story, The Tale of Two Dads.
It's a very compelling literary device. I'll give him that.
It's the foundation of the entire philosophy. You have the poor dad, that's Kiyosaki's biological father. Now, we have to be clear. This man isn't poor in the, destitute sense. He holds a PhD, he's the head of education for the state of Hawaii. He is a pillar of the community, highly intelligent, highly respected. And yet, the man struggles to pay his bills his entire life and dies with very little to show for it financially.
Well, he dies with little money. I'd argue he had plenty to show for it in terms of societal contribution, educational reform. But okay, for the sake of the finance argument, I get the framing.
Right. In the context of financial freedom, he failed. He was trapped. Now, contrast him with the rich dad, his friend Mike's father. This guy is an 8th grade dropout. No fancy degrees, but he eventually becomes one of the wealthiest men in Hawaii. So my stance is that the difference between these two men wasn't luck, and it certainly wasn't academic smarts, it was financial literacy. The poor dad would always say, "I can't afford it." It's a statement, final. It closes the door. The rich dad forbade that phrase. He insisted on asking, "How can I afford it?" That's a question. It forces the brain to open up, to find solutions. One shuts down the mind, the other exercises it. That is the crux of my argument today. The book is about moving from being a passive victim of the economy to an active problem solver.
I see why that's empowering. It's a very seductive, pull yourself up by your bootstraps kind of narrative. But I come at it from a different angle. I think the way Kiyosaki frames his poor dad is actually, well, it's pretty pernicious. He describes this dedicated public servant as a cautionary tale. He basically equates working for money, which is what doctors, teachers, firefighters do, with a form of slavery or, stupidity.
I don't think he calls it stupidity. He calls it a lack of training. He says they're playing a game without knowing the rules.
But the implication is absolutely there. He creates this binary world where you're either a rich investor or a poor employee. My argument is that this binary is just false and reductive. It ignores the value of stability. It ignores the necessity of labor. And honestly, it suggests that the poor dad principles, education, savings, paying your debts, are traps to be escaped rather than, the bedrock of a functioning society. If everyone was the rich dad, who would teach the schools?
But if that bedrock is crumbling under inflation and stagnant wages, isn't it time to question the foundation? The poor dad did everything right by society's standards and still suffered. And that brings us to the first major pillar of this debate and honestly the most controversial part of the book. The definition of an asset.
Ah, yes, the infamous house controversy.
Exactly. This is where Kiyosaki makes accountants just scream, but it's where I believe he offers his most profound insight. He simplifies accounting into one single rule. You must know the difference between an asset and a liability. And he doesn't use the dictionary definition. He uses a cash flow definition. An asset puts money in your pocket. A liability takes money out of your pocket. Simple as that.
And by that definition, he famously claims your personal home is not an asset.
Correct. And he is 100% right. Look at the cash flow of a homeowner. You pay the mortgage, you pay insurance, property tax, you pay for the roof when it leaks. Cash is constantly flowing out. Therefore, structurally, it is a liability. The rich dad argument is that the middle class struggles because they buy liabilities, big houses, fancy cars, thinking they're assets. They just dig a deeper hole.
Okay, I have to push back hard here because this is where the financial literacy claim starts to look a lot more like, well, financial illiteracy. In standard accounting, an asset is something of value that you own. A house has value. It has equity. If you sell it, you get cash. By redefining asset to mean only things that generate monthly income, he's just confusing an investment with an asset.
He's not confusing them, he's distinguishing between value and cash flow. That's the nuance that saves you.
But it leads to a dangerous conclusion for the average person. If I don't buy a house, I have to rent. Rent is a 100% expense. It's money out the window with zero possibility of return. Mortgage payments at least build equity. By telling people their home is a liability, he scares them away from what has historically been the primary vehicle of middle-class wealth generation in this country. It feels like the definition is rigged just to sell his specific strategy.
It's not rigged, it's a reality check on liquidity. You can't buy groceries with home equity unless you take on more debt. The point he's making is about the order of operations. The idea is you should buy the real assets first, rental properties, businesses that generate checks, and let that cash flow buy your luxury house. If you buy the house first, you are house poor. You're just working for the house. The house owns you.
Being house poor is a real thing, I'll concede that. People overextend, but just labeling a home a liability is a distortion. It ignores the utility of shelter. You have to live somewhere. But let's look at why people fall into that trap. It's what Kiyosaki calls the rat race.
The rat race, yes. This is the emotional core of the book. He argues that most people are run by two emotions, fear and greed.
And this is where he shifts from accountant to amateur psychologist.
But the psychology holds up. Think about it. Fear of being without money drives us to work hard at a job we might hate. We're terrified of missing a bill. That fear wakes us up. Then once the paycheck hits, greed, or maybe just desire, kicks in. We see all the things money can buy, a new phone, a vacation, so we spend it. Then the money's gone, the fear returns, and we're back on the hamster wheel.
Get up, go to work, pay bills.
Precisely. And there's that pivotal scene where Rich Dad agrees to teach a young Robert, but only if he works for him for 10 cents an hour. The boys work, they get tired, they feel underpaid. Robert eventually storms in to quit, demanding a raise. He sounds just like every disgruntled employee ever.
And the rich dad traps him.
He says, "You're acting like everyone else." If he had given the boy a raise, the fear would go away for a week, and then greed would just scale up his spending. So Rich Dad does something drastic. He makes them work for free.
Which, today, we would call illegal exploitation.
In the lesson, it was necessary friction. By taking away the paycheck entirely, he forced the boys to stop thinking about the wage and start looking for opportunities. Because they weren't blinded by the promise of cash, they looked around. They saw the owner throwing away comic books. They asked for them, opened a little library, charged kids admission, and made way more money than they ever did stacking cans. The lesson is, the poor and middle class work for money, the rich have money work for them.
It's a great story. The comic book library is charming. But let's look at the subtext. This whole rat race concept is inherently derogatory toward labor. It implies that people who work jobs, nurses, engineers, sanitation workers, are just fearful sheep running on a wheel.
Well, if they're living paycheck to paycheck, aren't they? If they stop working, their life collapses. That is a precarious position.
Not necessarily. Many find deep purpose in the E quadrant, the employee quadrant. Society functions because of them. At one point, Kiyosaki compares employees to the town derelict, saying both work or beg for money, and neither is free. That is a profound insult to the dignity of work. Plus, this work to learn, don't work for money advice leads to some really bizarre career advice. He tells a talented writer she should go learn sales, not write better books. He commodifies passion.
I see that point, but let me offer a different perspective. He says specialization is risky, and he's right. If you're the best neurosurgeon in the world and your hands start to shake, your income goes to zero. You own a job. You don't own an asset. He's trying to teach the starving artist the business of art. You need to know a little about a lot: accounting, investing, markets, and the law.
And that mention of the law brings us to the most technical part of the book, the cash flow quadrants and the tax system. This is where the debate moves from mindset to pure mechanics.
This is where the rich dad philosophy goes from just motivational to structural. He breaks the world into 4 quadrants: E for employee, S for self-employed, B for business owner, and I for investor. And my position is that the tax code is, frankly, rigged against the E and S quadrants. If you don't understand that, you will always lose.
Rigged how, exactly?
It comes down to the sequence of spending. An employee earns money. The government taxes it immediately before they even see it, and then the employee tries to live on what is left. A business owner, a corporation, earns money, spends everything it possibly can on expenses, and then gets taxed on whatever remains.
The corporate veil.
He pays for all of this with pre-tax dollars. The poor dad pays for them with post-tax dollars. That is a massive, massive difference in purchasing power. Kiyosaki argues this isn't unethical, it's just the rules of the game. The government offers tax incentives to business owners and investors because they provide jobs and housing. Rich dad simply reads the rule book, poor dad ignores it.
I agree that's how the mechanism works, but my critique is on the accessibility and, I guess, the morality of it. Kiyosaki presents this as if it's just a simple choice. Oh, why stay an employee? Just start a corporation. But moving from the E quadrant to the B quadrant isn't just filing some paperwork. It requires capital, it requires a huge risk tolerance, and it requires an entrepreneurial temperament that most people just do not have.
He actually warns about that, though. He says the S quadrant, self-employed, the consultant, is the worst place to be. You have all the risk of a business, but you can't scale, and you pay the highest taxes.
Right, the S trap. But his worldview suggests a kind of conspiracy of the rich. He implies that schools were designed to produce good little employees who don't understand money, precisely so the rich can keep them as a labor force. It paints the economy as this predatory, zero-sum game where you are either the wolf or the sheep.
I wouldn't say wolf or sheep, I'd say player or pawn. The system exists, the tax code exists, you can complain about it like the poor dad, or you can learn how to operate within it like the rich dad. My argument is that ignoring the rules of the game doesn't make you noble, it just makes you vulnerable.
That's a compelling point. But what happens if everyone creates a shell corporation to write off their car lease? The tax base collapses. It's not a scalable solution for society. It's a loophole for the savvy. But let's set policy aside and look at the practical advice he gives for managing money. This is maybe the most controversial habit in the book. Pay yourself first.
This is my favorite practical tip because it requires immense discipline. It's the gym for your financial muscles.
I'd call it recklessness.
Let's explain it. Most people earn money, pay their bills, rent, credit cards, and then save whatever is left. And usually, there's nothing left. Kiyosaki says you have to flip that. When money comes in, you allocate your portion to the asset column, your savings, your investments, first, before the government, before the landlord.
And what happens when you're short on rent? When the power company sends a disconnect notice?
That is the genius of the pressure. He says, let the creditors scream.
That sounds horrifying.
It's uncomfortable, yes, but he argues that if you pay everyone else first, you feel no pressure. You're safe, but you're broke. If you pay yourself first and come up short for the bills, the fear of the creditors, the scream, kicks in. But instead of paralyzing you, it's supposed to inspire your financial genius. You're forced to hustle.
You have to find a way to make that extra $500.
I'm sorry, I just do not buy that. That is survivor bias, plain and simple. For Robert Kiyosaki, maybe the pressure inspired him to close a real estate deal. For the average listener, letting the creditor scream means late fees, ruined credit scores, eviction notices, and immense psychological trauma. It doesn't stimulate genius, it stimulates cortisol and panic. It ruins lives.
It is extreme, I'll grant you that. But the principle is sound. If you don't prioritize your own wealth accumulation above your consumption, you will never build wealth. He isn't saying don't pay your bills. He is saying use the pressure to increase your income rather than decrease your saving.
But you can prioritize saving without defaulting on your legal obligations. He even says in the book that he and his wife Kim had excellent credit, yet he advises using the pressure of not paying. It's a very mixed message. And this is my main issue with the book. It minimizes risk. He talks about insider trading in a positive light, using friends for tips. He dismisses diversification. He says put all your eggs in one basket and watch it closely. That works if you're a genius or you get lucky. It's catastrophic if you're wrong.
Well, Warren Buffett has said similar things. He says diversification is for people who don't know what they're doing.
Warren Buffett is a genius. Most people reading a $20 paperback don't know what they are doing yet. Telling a novice to leverage up, buy foreclosures, and ignore diversification because risk is a myth is just irresponsible. It frames the complex, dangerous world of investing as easy if you just have the right mindset.
I think you're taking it a bit too literally. He's using hyperbole to shake you awake. He's telling you that the safe path, the poor dad path of low-yield savings accounts and 401ks is a slow road to nowhere because inflation is eating your savings and taxes are eating your gains. He's arguing that real safety is an illusion.
He is certainly shaking people, but let's bring this home.
Okay, let's do it.
He quotes Robert Frost, "Two roads diverged in a wood. He chose the one less traveled, the entrepreneurial road, and that made all the difference."
And that is the summary of his life. The poor dad path is crowded, it's safe, yes, but it's limited. The rich dad path is lonely and scary, but that's where the freedom is.
And I would argue that the poor dad path education, expertise, contribution is noble. The book treats the poor dad as a failure, but he was a man of principles who educated an entire state. There's a value in that which can't be measured on a balance sheet.
But did he have freedom? That's the ultimate currency in this book. Not money, but time. The assets buy you time, the job sells your time. If the poor dad stops working, his income stops. If the rich dad stops working, his assets just keep paying him. That is the liberation. That is the entire goal.
It's a valid distinction, but let's wrap this up. We've covered the definition of assets, the rat race, taxes, and paying yourself first.
As we conclude, I just want to reiterate that Rich Dad, Poor Dad is, at its heart, a mindset book. Broke is temporary, poor is eternal. That line. It's powerful. It means your bank account doesn't define you, your financial literacy does. If you understand the difference between an asset and a liability, even if you disagree with his strict definition, you are already miles ahead of the average person.
And I'll concede, the book is a powerful motivator. It gets people interested in finance who would never read a textbook. However, I have to maintain that it presents a fantasy where anyone can just opt out of the economy's demands by thinking differently. It devalues labor, it flirts with reckless financial behavior, and it disrespects the stability that keeps society functioning. Read it for motivation, sure, but maybe hire a real accountant for the execution.
Fair enough. The book forces a choice. You can seek security, or you can seek freedom. You can listen to the poor dad, or you can listen to the rich dad.
And we hope we've helped you weigh that choice.
That's right. Thank you for listening to the debate. We'll see you next